business plans for the outside investor, for the banker. The banker's really looking at, the 5 C's that Tim went through. So those financial statements, they're important because you're speaking banker language then. You're speaking to them to the language that they're seeing and understanding in terms of what they expect to see from your business. So, they do want to know some basic background on your business. So who are we? Telling the story of, what's your mission? Why are you doing that? Vision, where do you want to be in the future and your goals for the future. There we go. So go ahead and flip. Differentiation. So why are you different than every other farm down the street that's walking in the door asking for money, or every person that has a dream of starting a business? What things differentiate you or make you unique? So what makes you different? Pretty straightforward. If you are very similar to most of the other businesses in your area, well, you need to come right out and say that, but say, emphasize the unique management skills that you bring to the table. You're trying to build confidence in yourself. Build confidence to the lender that you're someone who they would want to invest in. All right.
And I agree. I'm sorry. I just want to, this last one. This last one's really kind of important to me. And that is, we see people all the time coming in with passion. Passion about their business. And let's be, for the most part in agriculture, nobody gets into farming to land on the Forbes Fortune 100 list, right? Nobody is looking to make $1 million farming. They're doing it because they have a passion for it, because they believe in it and they want to do that. And as a banker, I can't tell you how appreciative I am of people who come with passion. It's so important. On the other side, it can't just be a dream, right? It needs to be backed up with good, solid strategic planning. And I think that if you can combine passion with a good business plan, with sound judgment and a reasonable expectation of the financial success of your business, it becomes very powerful. That is a very powerful thing to any, not just bankers, but any outside investor.
Yeah,
sorry.
Exactly. No, great stuff. You can go ahead and flip. Okay, there we go. Structure the company. Describe how. Who are the owners? Who are the key? If you are a sole proprietorship, say that. Hey, we're a sole proprietorship. If we are an LLC, describe the LLC. Tell the owner. Give some background information on the owners. Before you get too far down in that loan process, all those owners are going to be providing some financial. All their credit scores are going to be pulled. And individual information is going to be there anyway. So let's go ahead and describe it up front. No surprises in there. Who's in charge? That's a really important piece to describe. Who makes the decisions? That's good for your own management to actually have that in writing, because I know how farms operate. I grew up on a family operation, and at any given time, you could have convinced my dad, my grandfather, or I that we were each in charge at any given moment in our the few employees that we had didn't really like that arrangement. So there were some struggles there. Hence the reason I'm no longer, or part of the reason I'm no longer primarily involved in the farm, is that we needed to split some of that out. But who is in charge? Who makes the day-to-day decisions? The banker needs to know that as well. Who's going to be making the decisions on who can they. When they get a phone call from this person asking for $50,000 to be put in their operating account, can they honor that request? Because is that person authorized within that business to make that request? I mean, some very legal and basic things there. Who's responsible for what tasks? I think you covered SWOT analysis already, or going to. I saw that on the agenda, so we won't go through that. Your marketing plan. With your lender. They need to see some of the basic things there. They don't need the daily details. So, kind of a summary version. But you need to, especially like at Farm Credit. We work with lots of farmers. We know agriculture, so we will be able to sniff out if your plan makes sense to us or not. And if it doesn't make sense to us, you need to be prepared to explain to us why it should make sense to us, if that makes sense. If you're doing something new. Financials. This is really what we're going to be looking at. all those financial statements that Tim went over. If you're an existing business, we need to have them. If we're starting up, we need to have some projections, and we call those pro forma balance sheets, pro forma sort of projected statements. But what's your startup cost? What's our minimum capital that we need to get this business up and running from where we are today to where we need to be? And be realistic with those estimates. We'd like to see the 3 years of balance sheets and cash flow projections. If you have them in the past, to show us where you've been. Obviously, if you're starting up new, you don't have all the information there, but certainly you've got some of your background information for you personally. But the cash flow projection, that's really key. And all a cash flow projection really is a budget. We're budgeting where the money's coming from and where the money's going. It's a plan, and we need to see that you have a plan to make that business profitable. And it needs to be realistic. It needs to be based on realistic assumptions. If someone comes in and has a cash flow projection or an income statement that shows, say a corn crop yielding 350 bushels the acre, we're going to say, no, that's not realistic. I remember I worked in Pennsylvania for a while and worked with quite a few dairies. I remember a business plan that was submitted. I had a relationship there with it was a state-run sort of lending loan guarantee program, and I reviewed business plans for them every once in a while. And it was a dairy operation that their break-even was based on their cows having an average of 90 pounds per day production. If you're not familiar with dairy, that's your top tier dairy farms are lucky to keep that as their average, or really even have their top cows up there. So it was a very unrealistic level, and that was their break even. So it just, I had to tell them that's not one that's going to work. So make sure it's realistic. I like to throw in when I'm working with a customer or client trying to help them develop some cash flow projections, I always throw in there, well, what happens if our revenues decrease by 10% or our expenses increase by 10% in a given year? And then I also throw the 20% in there, because in farming that can happen just like that. I mean, price of fertilizer itself has been up and down, 20, 30% within a season. If you bought that fertilizer when you thought you were at the low of the market and found out, 2 weeks later that it dropped a little more, fuel, all those sorts of things. I like to throw those on there to see the what ifs and say, well, this looks good today, but what happens if our revenue decreases by 10% for any reason whatsoever? And it tells, that kind of, it's almost like a little stress test. See, how much stress can this business handle? What are your doors out? If we get into trouble, how do we find that exit? Can you sell a building lot, or have we already sold all the development rights and we have no options there? Is sale of development rights something that's in there? Are there family members willing to infuse capital into the business, particularly for a startup? What are some of these options if we have a back door out? Okay, the pro forma statements, which I mentioned already, basically just a projection. How will this business look as we go according to this plan that we're proposing that the business go down? So your your projected income statement, that's like your budget going forward. That shows us at the end of the year where we expect what our income to be, what our expenses to be. If you don't have your own farm averages to use, go out there and get some good reliable information on what would be a reasonable expectation. If you're in a commodity type business, that information is fairly easy to find. Here in New Jersey, we have every specialty crop under the sun that we could possibly get into. So some of that data is a little harder to find. Work with Extension, work with some other folks in that industry to get get an idea. What's an average yield on this crop? What prices do we expect on that for the year? Your projected cash flow, that's just simply your budget. And then your pro forma balance sheet, that's showing what your net worth is going to be going forward. Where are you starting out? Where will you be? And that flows from the other statements that you put together. All right. Next one. There we go. Sensitivity analysis, will that throw in 10%? What's that 10% what if is method of sensitivity analysis. You know, what happens if our income goes down? What happens if our expenses go up? You know, what happens if interest rates go up a percentage point? If you're in a position where you're highly leveraged, have a lot of debt, you know, that can really have a big effect on you. How does a loan fit into the big picture? You know, what's your 5-year investment plan? I really like the idea of having, you know, we talked about depreciation a little bit. You know, that I call it the rust factor. The day we buy a tractor, we get it home, pull it up, the equipment dealer drops it off, it's worth less than what it was, what we paid for it, right? And that goes down. We're going to have to replace that piece of equipment someday. We're going to have to put a new roof on the barn someday. We're going to have to rebuild our greenhouse someday. Whatever the asset is, it's depreciating over time. And so that list of replacement items, what's your 5 years? You know, how are we going to replace that equipment over time? Have that depreciation schedule matched up with a reinvestment plan. So we have a plan that we're putting away enough money each year out of our profits to where we are reinvesting. And it's good to just really think it through and say, you know, none of us can know when the engine or transmission is going to go out of a tractor, but we can predict it somewhat by the age of it and the use of it. If we have a tractor on our farm that was bought in 1951 and it was bought used, so you do the math on how old that thing is. It gets used once or twice a year. That's why it's lasted so long. Now, I worked really hard in the 50s and 60s when my grandfather was using it to cultivate the crops, but now it's a showpiece, an old antique tractor we pull out. So it'll continue to last forever. We're not going to replace that tractor. It's already been replaced as far as useful function on the farm. On the other hand, we have equipment that it's, you know, combine, for example. That's the only piece of the only harvesting equipment we have for the grain. It has to be replaced every so many years. It's going to wear out. It gets used a certain number of acres each year. We know that it's going to be replaced after a certain amount of years. We have to have that on that schedule and be planning for that reinvestment. And it's good to think it through to make sure, well, the combine and the big tractor don't get replaced the same year, because that's a big financial hit. So if you've got that plan and you're putting a portion of your profits off to the side to where it will be reinvested in those ways, and we're not buying a new tractor we may be buying a new piece of equipment or doing a major repair on some asset every year to even that burden out. What do you need to grow? If you want to you're at a place today with your business, you want to be, you know, say you want to be basically breaking even in the beginning, but you want to be at a certain profit level, or if you want to be at a certain level of sales in the future, what do you need to get there? If it's just simply time and investment into the business and growing your marketing, that's one thing. But if we needed that, you know, if we're in fresh produce and we need a bigger packing line in order to get to a certain sales level that we want to be in 5 years, well, we need to put that in our plan, your wish list. And then add the priority.
I'm sorry. Have some fun with the wish list.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, this is a fun one, right? Be creative, be imaginative. I think that when you sit down, you say, if money was no object, what would I really want to run my farm? What would I like to have? Would I like to have a big, expensive farm market? Do I want a petting zoo? Do I want to go into agritourism? You'll find that sometimes by making a big wish list, not only will you kind of set the bar higher and you'll set some really aggressive goals, which is good, but you'll get the creative juices thinking too. Maybe you'll think about your business in a whole different way. So, you know, I know that all of this is what I have to have, but make a little time for what you want to have, because it's a good process to go through.
It gives you incentive for doing what you're doing too. Say, hey, I can reward myself with this time-saving device or the nice new pickup truck or whatever that is. So I agree completely. So why is your cash flow budget, you know, is it necessary? I use this in my personal life. We use it on our farm business, and I, you know, help people with their own farms develop these. Of all the financials that we do, I really think the cash flow budget is one of the most important things we can do in terms of managing our business. And it's probably the least common piece that we do because no one requires you necessarily to do that. A lender may in the beginning when you're getting to know them to really see how that money's going, particularly when you're looking at developing an operating account. But it's really important to really see where's your money going to go, where's it going to come back in, so that you know, hey, May rolls around, I'm going to be $30,000 short just to meet the salaries of my employees. I need to identify where I'm going to get that cash. So if I'm going to borrow that, I need to have that conversation with my lender. The timing and a dollar amount of operating infusion, that operating account that we're drawing from. You can really fine tune that budget. I like to use averages from past years because that tells me how I spend my money in real time better than anything else. But if you don't have that data, you have to talk to some folks and say, hey, when am I going to have the highest expenses with this operation? What's the timing? Opportunity to prioritize capital purchases. So yeah, if I know that if I'm going, this is farm sale season, right? There's an auction, an auction any day of the week, just about this time of year. When can I make those sales? If I know that I have enough cash on hand to make that purchase, I see a real good deal, I can go ahead and take it. But if I also in the back of my mind say, I'm going to have to buy seed next month for this crop, I can't spend that much today. So it helps you discipline yourself. And
if that's not enough reason to do a cash flow budget,
yeah,
bankers love them.
Yeah, I mean, it really gives your lender an idea that you've really put thought into your business. You are organized to the point to where they have a lot of trust in investing in that business. So, yep, the components of the cash flow. So we're going to break this thing down. So your step one, your basic 5-line income statement, your gross sales minus your cost of goods sold. So everything that we're selling as a product, whether it's a crop, livestock, if we're doing some value-added type stuff or jams, jellies, whatever, everything we're selling are gross sales minus what it costs to produce that product. So that's your variable cost, your seed, your fertilizer, your labor your non-management labor. So if we have a produce business and we have field labor, that's where that goes in. That's your gross margin. That's kind of your gross income. And then we get to do all that lovely stuff called overhead, which is your insurance, your taxes, your operator labor, all of your rent, your debt payments, all that wonderful stuff is your overhead. Usually we put fuel into overhead because it's very difficult to parcel that out to the individual enterprises. And then that's your net margin, somewhat synonymous with profit. So next. Yep, there we go. So now we take out our family living expenses. Well, we're hopefully doing this if we're doing this as a business that we want to support our family, we're drawing some income out of that. Depending on your business structure, this may come out as management labor. You may be, if you're like a corporate type structure and you're paying yourself a salary as the owner and manager, you're doing that. If you're any sort of a partnership or single sole proprietorship, including even an LLC type arrangement, you're going to be doing an owner draw. You're pulling money out to pay your own family bills. So you need to have the family budget in addition to the farm budget, because the family budget tells you how much the farm needs to do to support you, right? And it also identifies, well, if the farm can only support this much, somebody else has got to get a job here on this family. We got to get some more income to pay these bills. Itemize your monthly debt payments, your operating lines. So if you have, like, we call them operating loans at Farm Credit, your debt you're taking out just for the expenses for that year that you're going to repay by the end of the year. Only your interest on that. Credit cards, some folks use them. I'm not a fan of those. I'd much rather see you do some sort of an operating line of credit for a wealth of reasons. Your capital debt payments, your vehicle loans, your equipment loans, and then your mortgage payments. pull them out and itemize them by how much you have each month. What do you need each month? Is it positive or negative? Each month we have, this is the income we see coming in this month. This is the expense we have that month. If you're any type of crop operation, this time of year, you're gonna have a lot of negative months because we still have family living expenses. We may still have some debt payments each month. If you ended up having to pay some income tax, you're paying that in those first few months of the year. So you have some negative months. So that's okay, but how are we going to overcome that? Are we going to draw on what's in the bank if we had some profit, or are we going to infuse some cash from a lender or something like that? And then, what are your capital needs? So if we need to make some purchases, what are they and how are we going to fund them? All right. So just some tips. If you're starting up, we can plan as best as we can, but there's always going to be some things we didn't think of. So build in some extra, and there are usually some inefficiencies when you're starting out, when you're learning how to do something new. So put in some error into your budget for that. Be realistic. Most businesses new businesses fail to show a true profit in the first 3 years on average of operation, and quite honestly, that's why the average lifespan of most new startup businesses is about 3 years, because it's just a few that really plan ahead and really have enough startup capital to really get through those first 3 years of that learning phase, of that building phase. Now, that's all averages. Each business is going to be a little bit different, but you can show a loss in the first year as long as you show that that's moving towards eventual success. Know what your averages are, your benchmarks. I mentioned that earlier with the corn example. If you come in there saying 300 bushels an acre is what I need to make my business profitable, any lender's going to just laugh at you on that. So whatever your industry is, try to find a benchmark for that. What is a realistic number to shoot for? And have others review your plan. I love having people proofread my work. I love seeing extra eyes on it. They provide input, things that I don't think about. I can read a document 27 times and have a misspelled word in there that some reason Microsoft doesn't recognize it as a, as a misspelled word, or just something that doesn't sound, it sounds right in my mind when I read it, but it doesn't make sense to the person reading it. My wife is great at that because we communicate in slightly different ways. So she reads it from a perspective that I don't have, and vice versa. So we often run time. She's in a business, having the line of work she's in, she has to do a lot of written communication. So we bounce things back and forth like that, and it really helps us because we have different perspective on things.